The notification sound pierced through the tense silence of my parents' kitchen. I was still reeling from our Thanksgiving dinner, a 3-hour performance of forced laughter and backhanded compliments. My phone screen illuminated. Unusual account activity. My heart skipped as I opened the banking app. $18,400 gone. Just like that. "What's wrong, Camille?" Dad asked, his eyes tracking my face with unusual interest. "My account." I struggled to form words. "Almost everything is gone." His reaction wasn't shock or concern. Instead, a small smirk played at the corner of his mouth as he casually dried a wine glass. "Bills needed paying, sweetheart." The glass nearly slipped from my trembling hands. "What bills? What are you talking about?" Mom glided into the kitchen, refilling her wine without making eye contact. "We're family, Camille. You'll survive." She sipped her Merlot and walked away as if she'd just commented on the weather, leaving me frozen in disbelief, staring at the red numbers on my screen. I slumped into a kitchen chair, frantically scrolling through my transaction history. There it was, 5 separate transfers, all within the past week. Each one initiated from an IP address I recognized, my parents' home network. "You stole from me?" My voice cracked as Dad leaned against the counter. "Family helps family," he replied, shrugging as if I'd questioned something obvious. "Your mother and I raised you, put you through college. Now it's your turn." I felt dizzy. "But you can't just take." "We didn't take anything," Mom interrupted, suddenly back in the doorway. "We borrowed what we needed. It's what families do." As I scrolled further down my transaction history, my stomach dropped. Another charge appeared, a $3,200 payment to a credit card I'd never opened. What else did I not know? I stumbled out to my car, that hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. Sitting in the driveway, the engine idling, everything suddenly clicked into horrible focus. The emergency calls for money that had started after my promotion last year. Dad's vague explanations about temporary cash flow problems. Mom's guilt trips about my easy life while they struggled. The times they'd borrowed my card for just one thing and returned it with mysterious charges. I pulled up my credit monitoring app, and there it was, a credit card opened in my name over a year ago. A card I'd been unknowingly paying the minimum balance on from my checking account, set up with automatic payments I never authorized. This wasn't impulsive theft. This was calculated, long-term financial abuse. "Mal, I need to talk to you, now." My voice sounded strange, distant, as my sister picked up the phone. I was still sitting in my parents' driveway, engine running, heater blasting. "What's up?" Mallory's voice was casual, the sound of her toddler playing in the background, mingling with a cartoon soundtrack. "Aren't you at Mom and Dad's for dinner? Did you know Mom and Dad have been stealing from me?" I didn't have the energy for pleasantries. The silence lasted 3 beats too long. The background noise of her life continued, Eliza's giggles, the television's cheerful music, but Mallory's breathing changed. "Yeah," she finally sighed, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Dad did that to me too, for years. You just have to let it go, Cam. It's easier." I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, feeling like I might snap the leather cover. "What do you mean, let it go? They emptied my account. $18,000, Mal." "Look, they're just like that. It sucks, but fighting it makes everything worse." Her voice sounded resigned, beaten down. "You know how they helped themselves to that $5,000 you were saving for your Japan trip last year? They told everyone you offered it to them for their anniversary cruise." I froze, the car suddenly feeling even smaller. What $5,000? What Japan trip money? I'd been saving for a trip, but I'd never told my parents about it, and I certainly hadn't given them a dime for any cruise. "You didn't know about that either?" Mallory's voice faltered. "Oh, Cam, it's worse than I thought." Back in my apartment, I spread my financial statements across the kitchen table, hands trembling as I highlighted each unauthorized transaction. The $5,000 Mallory mentioned, $3,000 last Christmas, $1,200 in spring. Small amounts, too, $50 here, $100 there, that I'd attributed to my own spending. My phone buzzed with a bank notification. A Venmo payment of $1,200 to my sister-in-law Natalie had just processed from my account. The memo read, "For new kitchen tiles, love you." I hadn't sent it. Sweating, I pulled my credit report. There wasn't just one credit card I didn't recognize. There were 2. The second had a balance of $9,300. The delivery address for all purchases? My childhood home. How long had this been happening? How deep did this go? The bank representative's voice was professionally sympathetic as I sat in her office the next morning, my hastily gathered documentation spread across her desk. She'd squeezed me in first thing after hearing the urgency in my voice over the phone. "Miss Sanders, I'm seeing multiple accounts opened with your social security number." Her fingers flew across her keyboard, each click making my anxiety spike higher. "There's a personal line of credit from February, a store card from Nordstrom opened last summer, and a car loan from last March." "A car loan?" My voice sounded strangled even to my own ears. The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright. "I don't have a car loan. I paid cash for my Honda 3 years ago." She turned her monitor toward me, pointing to a line item. There it was, a $23,000 loan for a Mazda CX-5 with 3 missed payments. My parents drove a Mazda CX-5, the new car they'd proudly shown me last spring, claiming it was a great lease deal. "The loan application has your electronic signature," she continued, scrolling to show me the document. "But there are several red flags here. The contact email isn't your usual one, and the phone number listed isn't yours." My throat felt like it was closing up. The email address was 1 character off from mine. Camille Sanders, instead of Camille Sanders 1. Easy to miss if you weren't looking carefully. A decoy account they must have created. "Your credit score has dropped significantly because of these delinquencies," she continued gently, showing me a graph with a sharp downward trajectory. "Would you like to file a fraud report today?" The word fraud hung in the air between us. This wasn't just family borrowing anymore. This wasn't a misunderstanding or an emergency. This was crime. Methodical, deliberate crime committed by the 2 people who were supposed to protect me. "Yes," I whispered, feeling both terrified and strangely relieved. "Yes, I need to file a fraud report." The next evening, I returned to my parents' house, a thick manila folder of documents tucked under my arm. They'd texted as if nothing had happened, inviting me for dinner, saying they had good news to share. My hands trembled as I rang the doorbell of my childhood home, the sound echoing like an ominous gong. Dad was grilling steaks on the back patio, whistling cheerfully. Mom was tossing a salad in the kitchen, humming to herself, wearing the new pearl earrings I now suspected I had unknowingly purchased. "There she is," Mom called out, her voice artificially bright. "Just in time. Your father's about to take the steaks off the grill." I forced myself to smile and play along, mechanically helping set the table with the good china, the set they only used for special occasions. My mind raced with questions. What was the good news? Another vacation they'd booked with my money? A major purchase they were about to make with a credit card in my name? I waited until we sat down, the perfect family tableau around the dining table with candles lit and wine poured. Then I slid the folder across to my father, my heart pounding so hard I thought they must be able to hear it. "I need to know why," I said quietly, watching as he opened it to find bank statements, credit reports, IP logs, all meticulously highlighted and organized. He didn't even look surprised, just annoyed, like I'd interrupted a good TV show with something trivial. He closed the folder without examining its contents, pushing it aside to make room for his plate. "You owe us," he said flatly. "You wouldn't have your degree without us. Your nice apartment. Your job." Mom touched my arm, her wedding ring catching the candlelight. "Sweetie, you're being dramatic. We're just borrowing until tax season. We always plan to pay it back." I pulled my arm away, my skin crawling from her touch. "You stole $18,000 yesterday alone, and thousands more before that." She smiled tightly, cutting her steak into perfect bite-sized pieces. "We're family. Family shares. Your father and I have given you everything. This is how you repay our sacrifices?" "You don't understand what it's like," Mom said, pushing away her plate. "Your generation has it so easy. When your father and I were starting out—" "This isn't about generations," I interrupted. "It's about stealing my identity and taking my money without permission." Dad's face hardened. "We didn't steal. We survived. You should be grateful we're still here after the heart attack I had last year." The heart attack he'd fully recovered from. The one they'd used to justify borrowing $3,000 for medical bills that insurance had actually covered. If you really loved us, Mom added, you wouldn't even think about the money. I discreetly pressed record on my phone under the table. Their words were twisting reality, making me question my own sanity, but the numbers didn't lie. I want everything paid back, I said firmly. All of it. Dad laughed. Or what? Or I'll go to the police, I replied, the words hanging heavy in the air between us. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. You wouldn't dare. Not if you ever want to be part of this family again. The knock at my door came at 7 a.m. on Saturday. Still groggy from a night of fitful sleep, I stumbled to answer it without checking the peephole. A mistake. I opened it to find my 4-year-old niece Eliza standing there, backpack in hand, my sister already halfway to her car in the apartment parking lot. Auntie Cam? Eliza hugged my legs, her curly hair tickling my knees. Mallory called over her shoulder. She's yours for the day. You need to cool down and remember what family means. The slam of her car door punctuated her words, followed by the screech of tires as she drove away, leaving me with a confused preschooler. I stared after her in disbelief. They were using a child, an innocent 4-year-old, to manipulate me, to distract me, to force me into line. Can I watch Frozen? Eliza asked, already making herself at home on my couch, seemingly oblivious to the tension. Mommy said you have the good snacks. Sure, sweetie. I handed her the tablet I kept for her visits, trying to hide my trembling hands. I'd always loved spending time with Eliza, but this, using her as a pawn, made me furious. While she watched, happily singing along to Let It Go, I noticed the payment app was still open. Saved under Payment Methods was a card labeled Sugar Auntie Card, my credit card, which I had never added to the tablet. I clicked through the history and found dozens of charges. Games, movies, in-app purchases, even food delivery. I looked at Eliza, contentedly watching her movie, oblivious to how she was being used. A new resolve hardened in me. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about breaking a cycle of manipulation that would eventually engulf her too. Based on what you've shown me, this isn't just casual borrowing, the attorney said, reviewing my documents across her polished desk. Her office was warm and inviting, with plants on the windowsill and framed degrees on the wall, all signs of stability I desperately needed right now. Rachel Goldstein specialized in financial abuse cases. The online reviews had called her thorough, compassionate, and relentless, exactly what I needed. She adjusted her glasses as she sorted through the credit statements and bank records I'd brought. This is systematic financial abuse and identity theft, she continued, her words landing like stones in my stomach. The forged signatures, the fraudulent accounts, the pattern of escalating withdrawals. It shows premeditation and awareness of wrongdoing. I swallowed hard, twisting my hands in my lap. But they're my parents. Unfortunately, Miss Sanders, that makes it worse, not better. Her expression softened slightly. They've exploited your trust and your personal information. The car loan alone is grand theft, and using your niece's tablet to make purchases adds another troubling dimension. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Do not bring outsiders into this. Family business stays in the family. Dad is very upset. Call us immediately. How did she know where I was? Had she put tracking software on my phone? Was someone watching me? The attorney noticed my expression. Is everything all right? I showed her the text. She nodded grimly. This is classic isolation technique. They're trying to prevent you from getting help. What are my options? I asked, my mouth dry. You have 3 options. Press criminal charges, file a civil suit, or try to resolve this privately with a legally binding agreement. What would you do? I asked quietly. She leaned forward, her eyes kind but serious. If they were strangers who had stolen your identity and taken nearly $100,000, would you hesitate to report them? I already knew the answer, and somehow that clarity brought tears to my eyes. The knock on my apartment door startled me awake. It was 6:30 a.m. Through the peephole, I saw my father shifting nervously from foot to foot. Camille, please, just talk to me. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. He looked terrible, unshaven, red-eyed. He thrust an envelope toward me. Here, $2,000, it's a start. I didn't take it. Dad, you took over $50,000 altogether. $2,000 isn't even close. I know, but, he rubbed his face. Look, your mother doesn't know I'm here. We can work this out, just you and me. My attorney's warning flashed in my mind. They might try to give you a small amount to make it look like you accepted a settlement. I stepped back. I can't do this alone with you. Everything needs to be documented now. His face changed, hardening. So that's how it is? You'd choose paperwork over blood? I just said bye, Dad, and closed my door. I saw him stomp in anger through the window. The cease and desist letters went out the next day. One to my parents, one to Mallory. I spent hours afterwards sitting on my balcony, alternating between crying and feeling an odd sense of relief. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from Mom. How could you do this to us? After everything we've sacrificed, you're killing your father with stress. I didn't respond to any of them. Then a call from an unexpected source, James, Mallory's husband. Camille? I had no idea any of this was happening, I swear. His voice sounded genuinely distressed. Mallory showed me the letter. I'm horrified. They used our daughter's tablet? They took money for our kitchen that we never renovated? Yeah, I said quietly. He took a deep breath. If you need me to testify about anything we received, I will. This has to stop. For the first time in days, I felt less alone. The call from Aunt Jeannie blindsided me. I was at work, charting patient information when her name flashed on my phone. My father's sister had always been warm but distant, living across the country and only appearing at major family events. Camille? Her voice was thick with tears. Is it true? Are you suing your parents? I stepped into an empty break room, my pulse racing. It's complicated, Aunt Jeannie. They told everyone you voluntarily gave them money every month because you loved them so much, she interrupted. For years, at every family gathering, they bragged about how generous you were. My heart sank. I sank into a plastic chair. That's not what happened. I know that now, she whispered. Your cousin Ryan is a banker. He looked at the documents your lawyer sent. He said it's one of the worst cases of family financial abuse he's ever seen. I pressed my forehead against the cool window, watching ambulances come and go in the hospital parking lot below. They told the whole family I was giving them money? They told us you insisted, that you were so successful, you wanted to support them in their retirement, that it was your idea. Her voice broke. They showed us texts from you. I guess they were fake. Photos of gifts you supposedly bought them. Your mother even cried once talking about how blessed she was to have such a selfless daughter. The fabrication was so complete, so detailed. They hadn't just stolen my money, they'd created an entirely fictional version of me to present to the family. A daughter who didn't exist. A relationship that never was. I believed them, Aunt Jeannie continued softly. We all did. I'm so sorry, Camille. You need to know something else, Aunt Jeannie said during our second call. I'd left work early, too shaken by our first conversation to focus on patients. Now I sat in my parked car, rain pattering on the roof, creating a cocoon of white noise around me. What is it? I asked, dreading whatever new revelation she might have. Your grandmother's college fund. Her voice was hesitant. Did you ever receive it? My throat tightened. What college fund? The silence on the line was deafening before she continued. Oh, Camille, your grandmother left $30,000 for each grandchild's education. Yours, Mallory's, and your cousin's. It was in her will. The money was supposed to be available when you turned 18. I gripped the phone harder, knuckles whitening. I never saw any of that money. I took out $62,000 in student loans to get through nursing school. I'm still paying them off. The rain fell harder, drumming against the car roof as my world tilted again. Another piece of my past rewritten. That's why I'm calling. I was the co-trustee with your father. Your father brought me papers to sign when you started college, saying you wanted the money in your personal account instead of paid directly to the university. My mind raced back to those difficult years, working nights at a convenience store, while studying during days, eating ramen to save money, the crushing weight of accumulating loans. All while a fund that should have covered most of my education sat in my parents' possession. I never signed anything like that, I whispered. I know that now, she replied, her voice breaking. Your signature looked off, but Mark said you were in a hurry. I trusted him. He was your father. I never thought. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. My parents hadn't just started stealing recently. They'd been doing it for over a decade, beginning when I was barely an adult. before I'd even had a chance to establish my own financial identity. "Aunt Jeannie," I said, watching the raindrops race down my windshield, "I need every document you have about that fund." The county courthouse was quieter than I expected. Gray marble floors echoed with hushed footsteps, and the smell of old paper and furniture polish filled the air. My attorney, Diane, guided me through security and into a small office where a clerk waited to take my statement. Sunshine streamed through tall windows, casting long rectangles of light across the worn wooden desk where I now sat. The contrast between the peaceful setting and the turmoil in my heart couldn't have been greater. "Are you sure you want to proceed with criminal charges?" Diane asked one final time, her hand resting supportively on my shoulder. "It will mean a police investigation. Your parents could face jail time." I thought about everything I'd discovered in the past week, the nearly $90,000 they'd stolen over the years, including my grandmother's inheritance, the credit they'd destroyed, the elaborate lies they'd told the entire family, the way they'd manipulated my niece, the trust they'd shattered. "I'm sure," the clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, walked me through each form. Identity theft, fraud, forgery, embezzlement. Each charge felt simultaneously wrong and right as I described the evidence supporting it. My hand shook as I signed the final affidavit. 3 hours later, I signed the final page of my statement. It was official. I had filed criminal charges against my own parents for identity theft, fraud, and embezzlement. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice small in the cavernous room. "A judge will review your statement and the evidence," Diane explained. "If they find probable cause, which they almost certainly will with this documentation, they'll issue a summons." That Sunday, as my parents hosted their weekly family lunch, an event I'd been pointedly not invited to, a sheriff's deputy would arrive with formal notices of the charges and a court date. There was no going back now. I had officially declared war against the people who gave me life. For 5 days after the sheriff's visit, I heard nothing. No angry calls, no tearful texts, no manipulative emails, no flying monkeys sent to guilt me into dropping the charges, just silence, oppressive and unnerving. I jumped at every notification, startled at every knock on my door. The silence was somehow worse than confrontation, leaving my imagination to run wild. Were they planning something? Destroying evidence? Turning the family against me even more? At work, I made stupid mistakes, forgetting to check a patient's bracelet, mixing up medication times. My supervisor noticed, suggesting I take some personal days. "Whatever's going on, Camille, you need to address it. Your focus isn't here." She was right. I was a zombie, going through motions while my mind constantly circled back to my parents' silence. Why weren't they fighting back? It wasn't like them to surrender without manipulation. Then Mallory called, her voice tight with anger. "Do you know what you've done? Mom can't stop crying. Dad's talking about how you've betrayed them after all their sacrifices." "What sacrifices, Mal?" "They stole from both of us for years." I paced my living room, adrenaline flooding my system at finally hearing something, anything, about my parents' reaction. "They're telling everyone you made it all up for attention, that you're mentally unstable and always have been." Her voice cracked. "That you've had problems since you were a teenager, and this is just another cry for help." Of course, they weren't being silent. They were reshaping the narrative, positioning themselves as victims of their unstable daughter. "I don't know what to believe anymore," Mallory continued. "James is saying one thing, Mom and Dad another. Everyone's taking sides." The silence wasn't absence, it was calculation. They were rebuilding their mythology, casting me as the villain in a story where they were the long-suffering heroes. "The bank records don't lie, Mal," I said softly. "Ask yourself why they haven't denied the actual charges." Grandmother's younger sister passed away unexpectedly. The family gathered at the small church in my hometown, a sea of black clothing and solemn faces. I stood in the back, unsure of my welcome. My parents arrived late, making a show of their grief. Mom dabbed at dry eyes while Dad accepted sympathetic pats on the shoulder. Neither acknowledged my presence. Whispers followed me. "That's her, the one suing her parents. Can you imagine being so heartless? I heard she's having a breakdown." As I turned to leave, my cousin Sasha caught my arm. "Don't go yet," she whispered. "I need to talk to you." In her car after the service, she pulled out a folder. "You're not the first, Camille. Look at these." Inside were loan applications in her name, loans she'd never taken out, bank statements showing unexplained withdrawals. "Aunt Lisa and Uncle Mark did this to me when I lived with them after college," she said quietly. "I was too scared to fight back then, but I'll testify for you now." The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty when Mallory found me during my lunch break. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usually perfect makeup smudged. "Can we talk?" she asked, sliding into the seat across from me. I nodded cautiously. She pulled out a credit card statement. "I found this hidden in James's desk. It's in his name, but I never saw it before." Her hands trembled. "The purchases are all things Mom and Dad have. The leather sectional, Dad's golf clubs, the patio furniture." I examined the statement. Sure enough, over $15,000 in charges for items sitting in our parents' house. "James didn't know," she whispered. "Dad told him I had approved it all as gifts. He forged my signature on the application, used James's credit because mine was already maxed out from what they did to me." Tears streamed down her face. "You were right, Cam. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." Detective Rivera spread photographs across the table. Images of credit applications, forged signatures, bank withdrawals. Her office at the Financial Crimes Unit was small but organized, case files neatly labeled on metal shelving behind her desk. Outside, rain lashed against the windows, matching my turbulent emotions. "We've frozen their accounts pending further investigation," she explained, her voice matter-of-fact but not unkind. "The evidence is overwhelming. We found a notebook in your father's desk drawer detailing every account he'd opened in family members' names. Yours, your sister's, your brother-in-law's, even your cousin Sasha's." The notebook was opened before me, my father's meticulous handwriting documenting his crimes like a business ledger. Columns for names, account numbers, balances, payment due dates, all organized with the precision he'd always prided himself on. My stomach churned at the cold calculation of it all. How many people did they do this to? At least 7 that we can document. The total exceeds $200,000 over the past decade. She tapped a pen against her notepad. "This isn't impulsive behavior, Miss Sanders. This is a systematic pattern of fraud." She slid another document toward me. "We also found this. A savings account in your name with approximately $42,000 in it." I shook my head, confused. "I don't have a savings account like that." "Exactly. They were using your identity to hide money from creditors. The interesting part?" She tapped the paper. "The withdrawal authorizations all have your forged signature, but the deposits are all in your father's handwriting. They were hiding their own money in accounts under your name, possibly to shield assets." The implications were staggering. Not only had they stolen from me, but they'd potentially expose me to tax fraud charges. The pit in my stomach grew deeper. "What happens next?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the rain. "We continue building the case. With your testimony and these documents, we have more than enough for prosecution." Her eyes softened slightly. "I know this is difficult. They're your parents, but this isn't a misunderstanding. This is calculated criminal behavior." I nodded, numb but resolute. "I know, and I want it to stop." "Financial predators hide behind family ties," read the headline of the local news blog. Though names were changed, anyone who knew us would recognize the story. A respected middle-class couple who systematically defrauded their daughter and other family members over a decade. My phone rang that evening, unknown number. "Is this Camille?" The woman identified herself as a reporter from a larger regional paper. "We'd like to do a feature on your case. Financial abuse within families is rarely reported." I declined politely, my hands shaking as I hung up. Minutes later, a text arrived from my mother. "Is this what you wanted? To humiliate us publicly? To destroy everything we built?" Attached was a screenshot of the article and a photo of a check for $6,000 made out to me. "Take this and drop the charges. Last chance to be part of this family." I forwarded the message to Detective Rivera without responding. As the case progressed, more shocking details emerged. My former roommate Lindsay was called to give a statement and confessed that my parents had been paying her $200 monthly to report on my finances. "They said they were worried about you," she explained tearfully over the phone after I discovered her involvement. They paid off $10,000 of my student loans if I would just let them know when you got raises or bonuses. The betrayal cut deep. Lindsay had been in my life for 3 years, had helped me move, had celebrated birthdays with me, had supposedly been my friend. They said it was for a surprise trust fund they were building for you, she insisted. I never thought they were stealing. I remembered all the times I'd mentioned financial plans to her. Buying a house, taking a vacation, investing in my 401k. Each time, my parents had suddenly needed emergency funds shortly after. I'm so sorry, Camille, she sobbed. I didn't know. I hung up without responding. The voicemail arrived at 2 a.m., jolting me from fitful sleep. My father's voice slurred through the speaker, the familiar cadence distorted by what sounded like alcohol. This is your last chance to be part of this family, Camille. Drop the charges, or don't bother coming around again. Ever. His voice hardened, the warm father I remembered completely absent. You're making a choice right now that you can never take back. Your mother is devastated. Is this what you want? To break her heart? To destroy us? I played it for Detective Rivera the next morning in her office. She added it to the growing file of evidence, her expression grim. That night, my apartment building's security guard called me as I was coming home from a late shift. Miss Sanders? Someone tried to access your unit using your mother's maiden name as authorization. When I refused entry, they left but seemed quite agitated. I thought you should know. A chill ran through me, goosebumps rising on my arms. Had my father actually come to my home? What would he have done if he'd gained entry? I packed an overnight bag and checked into a hotel 10 miles away, double-locking the door and pushing a chair against it before I could fall into a restless sleep. Every noise in the corridor made me start awake, heart pounding. The next morning, I filed for a restraining order against both my parents. The court clerk's sympathetic expression as I filled out the forms made it all the more surreal. I never imagined I'd need legal protection from the people who had raised me. But the evidence was clear. They saw me not as a daughter to love, but as a resource to exploit. And resources that fight back become targets. The judge has ruled, my attorney said, her voice triumphant over the phone. Your parents have been found guilty on all counts. They've been ordered to pay full restitution of $92,365 to you directly, plus additional damages to the other victims. I sat down hard on my couch, overwhelmed. Their assets have been frozen and will be liquidated to pay the judgments. The judge also ordered 5 years of probation and mandatory financial counseling. No jail time? I asked, surprisingly relieved despite everything. First-time offenders with their age and health considerations, the judge felt probation was appropriate, but they'll be monitored closely. Any violation means immediate incarceration. I exhaled slowly, feeling a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. You did the right thing, Camille. Not just for yourself, but for everyone they might have targeted next. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to cry, not from pain, but from vindication. The mediation room was sterile and cold, a neutral space for final statements before the case closed. My parents sat across the table, looking smaller somehow. Dad's face was haggard. Mom's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide her fatigue. Their attorney spoke first, a rehearsed apology about misunderstandings and family dynamics. When my turn came, I looked directly at them for the first time in months. I spent my whole life trying to be the perfect daughter, I said quietly. I thought if I earned enough, achieved enough, gave enough, you'd finally be proud of me. But now I understand. It was never about love. It was about what you could take. Mom started to interrupt, but Dad placed a hand on her arm, his eyes never leaving mine. You didn't break me, I continued, my voice growing stronger. You freed me. I know who I am now and who you are. I don't need your approval anymore. For just a moment, I saw something flicker across my father's face. Something that looked almost like genuine regret. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment in Denver, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Starting over hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. The restitution money had cleared my student loans and funded my fresh start. My new job at a hospital across the country put physical distance between my past and my future. I kept in touch with Mallory, though cautiously. She and James were in therapy, rebuilding their Marriage after the revelations about our parents. Little Eliza still video called me weekly, her innocent chatter a reminder that some bonds were worth preserving. On my desk sat a single framed photo, Eliza at the park, her smile radiant. Not my parents, not my past, just possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from my new friend Claire about dinner plans. Normal, healthy, drama-free. I smiled as I typed my reply. I hadn't lost a family, I'd lost a parasite, and found myself in the process. It turns out freedom has its own kind of richness, deeper than any bank account could hold.